So how are you? It's good to talk to you face to face in some sort of way.
I know, right? I'm good. I'm good. I don't even think I've actually seen you since I was still in high school, I think.
Yeah.
And we're getting up there, so that's been a while.
I know. I have like memory of running into you like outside of some sort of party, and I can't imagine it must have been my senior year because you're class of '04, right?
Hmm.
So it must have been my senior year, and I think I was with like Jess Lauer, and I can't imagine what party I could have been at, but I remember like running into you outside of there, and I feel like that's the last time I ever saw you.
That could be true. Thank God for social media, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's an interesting thing about you, and to get right into it, that I hadn't seen you in so long, hadn't really heard about you, but you see people posting on social media all the time, and it's kind of like that thing where you just assume everything's good, everything's fine. Look, they're having a good time, they're having a great time, and then I guess probably about 5 years ago or so now, you kind of made it public as far as your struggles with substance abuse and addiction, and you would post comparison pictures of yourself from previous years and you in current day, this being 5 years ago now,
Yeah.
and thinking like, oh, I remember when she posted that, and you just never know what someone is going through, what they're battling with, and what they've had to overcome to get to where they are when you're seeing them, in current day. So
Yeah.
it was a great lesson that you taught me from that and being open about your struggles.
Oh, you know what? There's something that I've taken to heart really is that we recover out loud so that others don't die quietly. Because like me finding my way into long-term sobriety, like I'm not in the majority, like I'm in the minority by far. Most people don't make it. And I mean, you're on social media enough to see all the, oh damn, this one hurts, rest in peace, it's every day. I mean, at least for me, but like that's also because I'm deeply ingrained in the recovery community. So, I know people in recovery from high school and from every year since then. So it's a constant battle, but like I recover out loud so that other people don't die quietly.
It's great. I mean, it gives me, I've got family that struggles with addiction, and occasionally passing acquaintances that you hear of that have struggled and lost their battle. And you're actually one of the few that I can point to of, a positive recovery story. And probably until I knew that you were going through this, and congratulations on your 5 years.
Thank
Um,
you.
I just, it was one of those things that when you see documentaries, no one really gives you uplifting stories. It's always kind of, you watch those crappy shows on TLC or whatever those channels are where they're covering addicts, and then at the end it's just the parent talking about, yeah, he lost his battle, and you're just thinking like, all you think is that it's a losing battle 100% of the time. So you're a great example of how that doesn't happen.
Thank you.
Yeah. So before all of that, and before I ran into at this party in high school, um, where did you start at Wissahickon?
Well, I didn't move to Bluebell until the summer before my ninth grade year.
Oh
My
wow.
dad worked in IT and we moved a lot. So it was summertime. We moved. My dad actually moved up here and lived in Ambler on Butler Pike by himself for a year so that I could finish middle school in Virginia and my sister could finish elementary school. So as soon as school let out, we moved. So my mom, my sister, and I moved up here, and my dad was already here, and we moved into our house in Bluebell. And I had lived in Virginia for so long, I had no idea that everyone went to the shore over the summer, because and our neighborhood was still being built, so there just like weren't very many people here to get to know. So I spent that entire summer like sitting on my desktop computer on what was that, AOL Instant Messenger, like the
Yeah.
old school one. Um, instant messaging all my friends in Virginia about how much Pennsylvania sucked. But yeah, then I started actually. My mom convinced me it was a good idea to get involved in a sport, and when we moved to Virginia, my dad said he wasn't going to make us move again. And then we ended up moving up here. So I was mad. And I played soccer my whole life. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to give it up just because I'm mad.
Get
So
back at them.
yeah, because that's what my like, what, 13, 14-year-old brain thought was a good idea. But I actually ended up joining the cross country team.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, and they had camp before school started. So that was my first introduction into Wissahickon.
What part of Virginia were you coming from?
Northern Virginia, Loudoun
Okay.
County.
Okay.
It was another neighborhood that we moved into while it was still being built. So I mean, I loved living there. It was super great. I did summer swim team. I played soccer. Everyone in the neighborhood was friends.
Mm.
It was great. And then I came up to Pennsylvania and I was living in Virginia and no one brought cookies to our door and welcomed us to the neighborhood and nobody seemed to be hanging out. So it seemed like a really strange place, but I got used to it.
Once you join the cross country team and you're doing camp before school starts, were you making friends, or was it still kind of like I'm just kind of hanging out in this thing waiting for the school to start?
A little bit of both. I mean, like I enjoyed the company of, the other girls on the team. Mostly the older girls. They were the nicest at least. So, you know, I did that and I didn't really feel like I was ready to start school when it happened, but at least when I was walking through the halls, I knew some people and not
Mm.
absolutely no one, because I'm pretty sure it would have been a little more traumatizing than it was if I didn't know anybody.
Part of this is me feeling like I only had such a little bit of friends going through school. And I remember our first day, we got like the half day at the high school to get the lay of the land. And you kind of have an early dismissal day on the very first day of ninth grade. And you're walking through and the hallways are empty. But it's so big. And for me, only having like 4 or 5 friends coming out of the middle school, I never saw any of my friends. It took like three
Yeah.
years till I saw any friends of mine. For you, and not, I don't know what your Virginia school was like as far as what you would have been going into for high school size wise, but what was your expectation for the Wissahickon as far as size versus Virginia, what you were originally preparing for, and how do you handle that, whether it's smaller or bigger than what you were expecting?
I mean, I think Northern Virginia is very densely populated.
Okay.
I think, if I remember correctly, because that's getting back in some years now, that the high school that I would have gone to in Virginia was a lot bigger.
Mm.
Um, you know, I I don't even remember how many people were in my middle school, but I really think it was bigger in Virginia. Just so many more people there.
So then when you're in the high school and you knew a couple people, a couple older, you said the older kids were a little bit nicer, but now
Mhm.
you're taking classes and it's just your grade. Do you start making friends? Does it come from cross country, or does it come from other places?
I mean, it was really more other places, classes, but I also made a lot of friends in the grade above me because I wasn't like, math is not my strong suit by any means.
Sure.
But my ninth grade math class was with a bunch of 10th graders. So I remember it was Ms. DiGregorio.
Mhm.
I want to say maybe geometry, but again, math's not my thing.
But you
And
were
there
taking in
were,
10th grade. I took geometry in 10th grade, so you were taking in ninth grade. You were taking a 10th grade math class.
yeah, I think. Well, I mean, I was, but
Yeah, so you must have played. So math wasn't your thing, but you must have placed up from Virginia.
well, I did, but like not nearly as far as I
That
could have.
that was the
Okay,
cap.
so let's make it relative, okay? Because I think I was expected to place a lot higher than I did,
Okay.
but I remember I was in class with a bunch of 10th graders who obviously were just a year separated from being hazed as a freshman,
Hmm.
and I got written on, and just it was spirit day, like every class wears their own whatever. And yeah, I mean, I think I think Miss D got like really mad and like shut it down because there weren't that many of us that were ninth graders in the 10th grade class, but like I had writing all over my arms and you
Wow.
know
Did you have stuff outside of school socially with these kids that were older that you like struck up a friendship with, or?
Well, one of my neighbors uh, was in the graduating class ahead of mine. So sometimes I hung out with him and his friends. And I kept doing cross country, but I'm pretty sure that was the only thing I really did, you know, outside of school. So anything that I did socially wasn't, necessarily school related.
Interesting. So go to school, go to track, come home, start all over again the next day.
Yeah,
So
pretty
what do you
much.
so what are you doing once you're home? Are you concentrating on homework? Are you talking to your friends still on AIM from Virginia? Are you watching TV shows? Like what's your social hobby after hours?
I mean, homework, but like really, I did as little of that as possible because
Same.
like I had undiagnosed ADD.
Oh.
And so, everyone thought it was a behavior problem that I just like didn't want to study. I didn't want to do the work. But like what was really going on was that like it was hard. It was really, really hard and frustrating for me. And I am intelligent. So I got by for a long time on just taking in what I learned in class and doing the bare minimum at home to get by. But, that only gets you so far. So,
Yeah, I had this same where I never diagnosed. I could be undiagnosed. I don't know for all. I've still never gotten it checked out. But I had a real issue with concentrating,
mm,
taking notes. I've talked at length about my difficulties of the way that classes were taught with focus on making an outline. And you just look at the outline and you copy the outline. And I was so obsessed with getting my outline just so with your Roman numerals and your capital A's and your letter and your number one and your lowercase a's, and I was so obsessive about copying that down perfectly that I was not taking in the information.
it's hard. I mean, like, I'm actually jealous of the kids that are in school now because, like, there's so many more resources for all the different ways that people learn, you know? And I mean, I'm sure some of that was starting to be implemented when we were that age, but not so much. It was pretty rigid. So, I'm glad that at least now people are more aware of it and, kids can actually have their education a little bit more catered to the way that they learn.
It's funny. I was talking to someone about educational tools, and I said I'm not sure how they do it anymore in school. In my day, we had transparencies. I don't know if that's still a thing. And they're like, yeah, we do smart boards now. And I was like, oh right, that's even better. That's so great. But yeah, the minute they
No,
would
they're
turn out the
definitely
lights,
lucky.
yeah, the minute they would turn out the lights in the school, it's like okay, nap time. Everyone look up here at at the transparency sheet.
Yeah, I think I got in trouble more than once for falling asleep during class.
Um, so did you have? You said math wasn't it, but did you have a subject that you were good at in school?
I mean, I always tended towards English and writing. Um, Writing mostly because it's a lot easier than reading when it
Hmm.
comes to, taking stuff in. So, I did a lot of creative writing stuff. I mean, I was a huge musical theater nerd. So
Really?
I was intensely focused on that in high school as well. Um, I enjoyed social studies because it was memorization, but it was stories basically. Like all I had to do was set my mind to be like, well, someone's telling me a story. It's just a real story about things that happened in the past. And that was easier for me.
That's interesting. You know, now that you say that you were a musical theater nerd, I feel like where I ran into you might have been. Did you do My Fair Lady?
No, I didn't do My Fair Lady, but I did Les Mis.
Okay, I was gonna say I feel like maybe I ran into you at like at the cast party or something. It's the only parties I ever went to in high school, um, and so I can't remember. I can't think of any other thing. So when you said that, I was like, oh wow. Why didn't you do My Fair Lady?
Um,
This is my other obsession.
Maybe I think I was just like too, I don't know, afraid to do it. Oh, you know what? That was I was running cross country
Uh,
and couldn't really do both. And at that point I did all 3 seasons of running. I did cross country in the fall, I did indoor track in the winter, and I did outdoor track in the spring. So at that point I was doing the track and, you know, running thing. And then I think I gave that up after 10th grade, which is why in 11th and 12th, I went full bore towards musicals.
Mrs. Reckner, who was our director through my high school time for the musicals, hated the conflict with sports. Luckily, I didn't
Yeah.
play. I didn't play any, but there were being, the guys were so short to come by. Anytime she casted any of the guys that were doing basketball or anything that required time in the afternoon from like from late winter until the spring, she was like it was like a war against coaches to get these kids into the auditorium for practice every day.
Yeah. I definitely remember the kids that tried to do everything, right? And them constantly having to like make compromises and like I mean, I think I even remember teachers like duking it out a little bit over which activity a student was going to be available for at what
Yeah.
time.
Um, you didn't do middle school with us, but I always look at middle school as kind of like a turning point for maturity, where the kids who are much grown or at least acting much growner become a little bit more prominently known. And I always felt behind a lot of those kids. You coming into high school, what were you noticing as far as dating, maturity levels, partying, things like that? Was it prevalent in your grades as I thought it was in mine? Were you ready for those sort of things? Were you included in those worlds?
I mean, yes and no, more so towards the end of high school.
Hmm.
I still had kind of like a fear of that, like earlier in high school. Um, I mean, I knew people were doing it. I just wasn't like, I wasn't necessarily doing it. I think it was like ninth grade. I had three of my best friends come over for a sleepover for my birthday, and like I think we didn't go anywhere. We just snuck out of my house. We like put on all black clothes and we waited until the middle of the night and we snuck out of the house and like went to the end of the cul-de-sac and like freaked out and came back. And I mean, that was, obviously that changed quite a bit later on, but that was pretty much where my head was at the beginning of high school anyway.
Yeah, it's funny, that for me, my fun was to just ride around with friends, playing, music really loud, and we didn't drink, we didn't smoke, we didn't even go to anyone's house. we, I would get picked up, and we would just drive from like Ambler to Bluebell. We would hit like bumps on the train tracks, and then we'd turn around and we'd come back, and
Mm,
we would
yeah.
do that every night.
Oh yeah. No, it was, I mean, I did a lot of driving around later, particularly on Bean Road, but I think we all did that at some point.
What um what were your friends then through high school, or at least in the earlier years, when you mentioned that you had for your birthday you had friends come over? What was your friend group?
At that point, if I remember correctly, it was three girls, Lauren Schwartz, Kristen McKernan, and Julie Lund. Um, and those were my friends for a while. Um, but then, I mean, I started smoking cigarettes. I started like doing bad stuff. So, the friend group became a lot more fluid after that, as far as like, well, who else smokes cigarettes and, who else does this? So, the friend group, I don't really even think it was very consistent at all. It was just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You describe it as fluid, because I think one of the things that I talk about with other guests when we talk about the cool kid crowd was just that the cool kid crowd, they partied. Most of them, drank or did or smoked or other things, and were having sex, and the group was large. And
Yeah.
when people who don't go to Wissahickon ask about, like, when I'm interviewing people, it's like, oh, they're a cool kid crowd or whatever, and they go, well, who are their friends? It's like, oh, well, they had tons of friends, and any given day they could hang out with 20, 30 different, rotating group of kids.
Hmm.
And so it's funny that you mentioned fluid, because that's exactly like, it seems like smoking cigarettes was your into the cool crowd.
I mean, at that point, yeah. Later on in life, it was other stuff, but cigarettes were the gateway.
Do you remember how you started smoking?
I mean, I think I had my first cigarette when I lived in Virginia. It was like a friend of mine. Her name was Karen. She lived on the outskirts of the neighborhood and like in the woods. And
Mm.
she had an older brother that was a teenager, and he was always smoking cigarettes. So we stole one of his cigarettes and like went out into the woods and smoked it. And like it made us so dizzy that we were like holding on to the trees. And I mean, I look back at that now and that's so funny, but you
That
know.
still happens to me.
Yeah.
I prior to COVID, I was a big fan of the drunken, hey, I've never do this, but can I bum a cigarette thing that I'd love to
Hmm.
do to people out of bars and stuff. And every time it would just be a shutdown for the night. I'd start sweating, and yeah, it would just be, I'd be like, all right, I can't go back inside. I can't go back inside. I have to leave.
Oh, that's terrible.
It is you would think, and we're talking like in my 30s, you would think I would have learned my lesson, but I have like three friends that smoke cigarettes that if we're hanging out and drinking beers or whatever, like they could get me to go outside with them and smoke a cigarette. I regret it 100% of the time, every time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're drinking, there's a whole bunch of stuff that seems like a really good idea at the time that, rarely is actually a good idea.
Very true. I didn't learn that until my 20s. I'm assuming you learned that a little bit earlier in life than I did.
I mean, I would love to say yes. I mean, I later on in high school, I drank heavily. Um, Wherever, whenever. Um, and I mean, looking back, it was really the jumping off point into my issues with substance abuse, and I smoked a lot of weed, occasionally there was something harder around. And I mean, if you put it in front of me, I did it. Um, in the program, we call it anything to take you out of yourself. So it didn't really matter what it was, that someone was offering me. I was interested in it if it was going to make me feel not like me. So, I mean, how I'm almost 36 and I just had 5 years clean and sober. So I did not, I mean, it's not that I didn't know that these things weren't a bad idea. I just couldn't stop myself.
What does not feel like you mean?
Well, like a lot of other addicts and alcoholics, I was never comfortable in my own skin. Um, I know what it's like to be the new kid and not necessarily know where you fit in. Even when you have found a place that you feel like you fit in, like when I really got into chorus and musical theater in high school, like, I mean, that's the closest thing to an actual solid friend group I had.
Mm.
But even in that group, I still always felt less than or different than. And, you know, like, I mean, the best way to describe it is I just didn't feel like even my skin fit me.
Mm.
So the first time I took a drink of alcohol and the first time I did plenty of other stuff, that like lifted. And I mean, the best metaphor that I've ever heard for it, and I use it all the time in meetings and when I'm like speaking at meetings, is like when you're driving on the highway in the pouring rain, right?
Mm.
And it's deafening. Like it's just pounding your car over and over. You can't hear the music. You can't hear yourself think. And then you drive under like an overpass. And for a split second, everything is silent. That is what drugs and alcohol were for me. They were driving under the overpass. So all the deafening stuff going on in my head was silent. I mean, at first, anyway, but obviously you get to the point where the alcohol and drugs aren't doing that for you
Doesn't work
anymore.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's what it was for me. It was a social lubricant. It was, I felt like I was most me when I had a substance in my body. So, I didn't drink like everybody else did. I didn't smoke weed like everybody else did. Like I took it to the extreme every single time.
I was just going to ask you. I talked to Francesco Santo about a month ago, who talked about his issues with addiction, and he said that he was kind of the outlier of his friends. He was invited to parties where kind of some of these things were open up, but no one was really doing the things that he was doing. He always took it to another level. So that's where you're saying your situation kind of was too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was always the drunkest, always the highest. Like, I mean, I really don't even think even as a teenager, I drank to black out.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I was fun for a little bit, but then I was like the annoying girl that couldn't stand up and was puking all over the place, and it was it wasn't good.
Did you have those separate friend groups you mentioned? Chorus and musicals. Did you have like your kind of your friends that you were doing drugs and drinking with, and then a different group of friends that maybe lived a more sober life while in school?
I mean, yeah, for sure. Because I mean, like the fun thing for me about being part of like chorus and musical theater was like it's a little bit of everybody,
Hmm.
like anybody can, play sports and whatever, but like you can do that and still have a passion for music, and have fun acting. So like there were just so many different kinds of people in, the music area of high
Hmm.
school. So I mean, some people that I hung out with were doing stuff like that I was in chorus with and
Hmm.
the musical, and others not so much. Like I said, I floated around a lot. My friend group was super fluid.
Yeah, it's funny. Like the friends that I made from chorus, or even like the strong acquaintances and the houses that I went to, I felt like there was never anything like that going on. At least with like my group of seniors of class of '01
Mm-hmm.
in chorus. But again, it's a large group, and I think talking about like where I was socially and maturity level, I probably gravitated to maybe some of the safer groups.
I wish I had done that sometimes. Although I'm sure just with most of the groups that I was in, I would have alienated them at some point with, my behavior.
Yeah, does so when you're living that way and you talk about you're always the drunkest, always the highest, do your friends it does become annoying for your friends then to are they looking after you, or is it just embarrassing, or how does that go with alienation?
Well, I mean, all of the above, like, and eventually you stop getting invited places because no one wants to have to take care of you. I mean, even like in college too, like I thought I had all these great friends, and eventually none of them wanted to talk to me anymore because nobody wants to have to take care of somebody else,
Hmm.
and I was a fall down blackout drunk every single time. So eventually that gets on even the most patient people's nerves.
How do you get away, assuming you did, how do you get away with that at such a young age, as far as going to school every day? Were you going to school every day?
Yeah, mostly.
Yeah,
I
how
mean,
do you hide that or keep it hush from grown-ups, your parents?
I mean, I didn't drink at school ever, I don't think. I mean, I smoked weed before school. Whatever, but
Yeah.
it was more so like after school on the weekends, and until I went to college, like, I mean, I was a blackout drinker in high school whenever I drank, but it wasn't as constant as later years.
When you have free time during the day.
Yeah.
Um, did you did you have in high school something that you were like passionate about, or something that maybe you thought like as you were getting older into your teens, like, oh, this could be a future? Did you see something for a future self, being that you were just so uncomfortable? Did you feel good about anything that you were doing, or that you had an interest in, that you thought I could be this when I grow up?
No, No, I wish I
Yeah.
had. I kept thinking, that something was going to come up, right? I was going to come across something that just like really ignited my passion. And I mean, that was musical theater for me. Like I could have done that for the rest of my life, not like, not needing to be like the star or anything like that, but like that community and, doing shows and, performing. Like I loved all of that. But like, I mean, I, I didn't think it was something I could ever make a career out of. So I just kept waiting for something else to inspire me, but it just really never happened.
Where did your passion for musical theater come from? Did you have it when you were younger?
I did. I always loved to sing when I was little, I mean, anything, everything. And my parents actually introduced my sister and I to Broadway. And I fell in love. I mean, you could take me into New York City any day of the week with any shows like available to see, and I'll find something that, you know, just like turns my world,
Hmm.
you know? So I was always like that. So I always did chorus and, um, it was just so much fun. And like, there's something about music too,
Hmm.
you know, just like it like intensifies everything, and the music like helps you express things that you can't necessarily express yourself, and when you step into the musical theater aspect of it, like you get to take on that persona and like bring a character alive. Like those things are all just amazing.
Yeah, I like that too. I also I love the camaraderie with
Hmm.
with the classmates doing musicals, and it's a tough gig. It's a really tough
Yeah.
gig, which is probably why generally people who don't think that they're good enough, it's not something they keep going for. Older. It's why I quit senior year, because I wasn't passionate about what we were doing, and it was way too much work to put in
Hmm.
if I wasn't passionate
It was a
about it.
lot of work, even for
Yeah,
the high school productions. Oh my gosh.
it was every day
Hmm.
till 7 o'clock at night, and I mean, hell, it was tough just on my mom, like having to pick me up after after work every
Yeah.
night.
No, it was fun though.
It was fun. It was fun. It's timeless memories, at least for me, that it's one of those things that I'll never be on Broadway, but I'm glad I had some of that experience, at least on a smaller level, because at that time I was passionate about it. I thought I was going to be like a Broadway actor. I thought I was going to go to college for theater. That's where my head was at, probably in like 11th grade.
Yeah.
Didn't happen.
I mean, I really envy the people that can, find something they're that passionate about in high school and follow through with it. Because I mean, like I said, nothing ever really inspired me like that. So, I went into college undeclared,
Which
and looking back, whenever people ask me about it, they ask what I majored in, and my answer is finding myself.
hmm.
So
What college did you go to?
I went to IUP.
Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Yes. Yes, I did.
What was your selection process like for college? Did you like were you just figuring it out and just winging it, or I didn't know anything about college when I was applying. My parents had never really done a big college. My parents had never like gone to college like that. My uncle was a professor, but like he didn't share that wisdom with me, and so I didn't know much. And all I knew was like Temple, 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 Temple. So I went to
Yeah.
Temple for a tour, stood out there on the campus, like, oh yes, this is where I want to go. Didn't realize how your grades had to be better. You had to apply before the day before the deadline.
Hmm.
And they told me not just yet. So I ended up doing 2 years at Monco, more out of inactivity and indecision than probably anything else. What was your path of figuring out what to do? Did you know?
Well, uh, with my like, my ADD and everything else, like my my GPA wasn't like stellar. It wasn't terrible. I think I graduated with like a 3.2. So I applied to 4 schools in Pennsylvania because, especially if I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, I didn't want my parents to be paying out of state tuition.
Right.
Um, I applied to East Stroudsburg, Millersville, IUP, and Kutztown. And oh God, my mom's gonna watch this, so I'm a little ashamed to admit this. I picked schools that did not require that I write an essay for the application.
Smart.
Because I just didn't like, I didn't want to. I don't know. I don't want to call it laziness because I don't think that was it, but like maybe I just didn't feel like I had anything to say, you know, like because I had no direction. I was really just, hoping that at some point I would come across something that inspired me. So I applied to all 4 schools and I got in, and I picked the
You got
one that
in.
was furthest away.
You got in all 4 though.
Yeah. Yeah. I picked the one that was furthest away. With my party habits and my drinking and tending to alienate people, I really just wanted to get as far away as I could and start over. So I picked IUP, which is like about a 5-hour drive. Yeah.
Wow. You only went to Wissahickon for 4 years. Often when I talk to people who come, in their teens to the area, they say that where they came from is what they kind of consider home. How do you feel about you moved away, 5 hours away for college? Do you look back at Bluebell as home? Wissahickon as home? Do you look at Virginia as home? Is it just an honest mix for you, or neither?
It's a mix, honestly, because I was actually born in Northern Virginia in Fairfax County. Um, I was, I think, under 2 years old when my parents moved to Michigan.
Oh, that's different.
We didn't live there for very long. Um, Apparently, it's really snowy and the weather's kind of miserable. And, um, you know, my parents weren't really happy there. So then we moved to Lansdale. I went to elementary school in the North Penn School District. And then that's when we moved back to Northern Virginia.
Oh, wow, that's
And
wild.
I stayed there for the end of elementary school and all of middle school. And then we moved to Bluebell and I did high school. But Philadelphia's home. If people ask where I'm from, that's what I say.
You say Philadelphia. Did you stay?
Yeah, I'm an
Okay.
Eagles fan. I'm a Phillies fan. Like Philadelphia sports, Philadelphia life. This is where I've lived the longest, and this is home to me.
So were you? I mean, were you looking to leave before you left? While you were there for? I mean, when you moved there in going into ninth grade, and like you want to quit soccer to punish your parents for pulling you away, and you hate it, and it's kind
Yeah.
of weird. And then, shortly after maybe a year or two later, you start falling into your habits. Um, were you happy with like where you were? Did you feel like the friends that you had were like true friends as maybe the ones that you left in Virginia that you were instant messaging when you first gotten here?
I mean, I still have friends from Virginia that I was friends with in middle school. Actually, my childhood best friend is from there. She still lives there. Um, you know, we both have 2 kids. And when your little girls, oh, our kids are going to grow up together, it's going to be great. So I have a 12-year-old. And then her oldest is going to be 4 this summer.
Okay.
And we were actually pregnant at the same time with our second kids. So I have the 12-year-old and I also have a 2-year-old. And my friend Katie's son was born a few months after my daughter Charlie. So, we see each other every summer. We do our best to show up for the important things.
Sure.
But if you ask me who my best friend is, it's her.
From Virginia.
So yeah, but then there's here, and the rest of my life since then has been here.
Okay. That's so interesting that with just the 4 years, that you were able to kind of connect. I find that that's kind of rare.
Yeah. Well, when you move as much as I did, it's so hard to feel like you are putting down roots, you know? Like, obviously, I don't really remember um, the first couple places I lived, but I remember living in Lansdale.
Yeah, I
And
was just gonna say, you don't remember glowing Lansdale back in the early '90s?
oh, I remember Lansdale. That was, I mean, it looks the same to
Yeah.
me now, but I remember that. Those are where my first memories kick in.
Okay.
And then I remember a lot about Northern Virginia, but then, after that came back and lived in Bluebell. And I mean, our our gun violence statistics aren't great for Philadelphia, but like it's great. The city's great. You can find something to do
Mhm.
anywhere. We're so close to the shore, and the Poconos, and why not? Like it's kind of cool living here.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned you didn't know that everyone went to the shore. What did you do in Virginia as a kid for like vacation?
Well, we had a timeshare. We still have a timeshare on Hilton Head Island in South Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think starting from when I was 12, we did that every summer. Um, and I mean, that's really the only memorable thing I remember about my summers.
Hmm.
And my parents didn't get a shore house until after high school. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, after high school. So I mean, we would go down occasionally to other people's houses, but our major trip was always down to South Carolina.
Wow, that's a drive from here.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's like 12 hours. As I've done it as an adult,
Hmm.
actually driving. So it's a lot. It's actually a lot harder when you're driving than when you're sitting in the back seat listening to your music, or, later on when you had portable DVD players
Oh
and
yeah.
whatever, you could entertain yourself. It's not quite as easy when you're actually driving.
Yeah, I just did a drive over Memorial Day weekend to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and that was eight. That was 8 hours. So that was a chore
Oh,
for
yeah.
like a family reunion. So we were there for like 3 days, turn around, come right back. The way back
Mm.
was rough because I was having memories of I just did this on the way down.
Yeah. You hadn't
Yeah,
quite recovered from the trip down there by the time you had to go back.
and you're right. It is like I've got such fun memories of being a kid and going to like Boston. And I
Hmm.
remember like I was 10, and it was when I first I got my first Walkman and two cassette tapes of MC Hammer's "Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em" and Criss Cross "Totally Crossed Out." And I listened to these two tapes nonstop in my headphones on my Walkman, sitting in the back seat, ignoring my mom and my grandmother the entire time, literally just listening to Jump and Can't Touch This, stopping it, turning it over, fast forwarding it, turning it back around, and playing the song back again. I did that for like 6 hours.
Yeah, kids today don't know how lucky they are just being able to hit a button and start a song over. And you can just set it so that the song plays over and over and over again. Like,
Right, repeat. Yeah.
so they don't even have to push a button if they don't want to. If they're just in a loop, they can set it so that it just plays over and over again.
Hmm. Did
The
you have
Walkman era.
Did you have a favorite song or band or artist from the high school time?
I mean, kind of. I was like still super into boy bands like
Yeah.
at the beginning of high school. Actually, the year before we moved up here, my parents got my sister and I tickets to see NSYNC.
Mm.
That was my first concert. It was a big deal. And back then, Pink was their opening act.
Wow, there you go. Look at so.
Yeah, exactly. So we went to RFK Stadium, which is where DC United Soccer Team plays, and we saw NSYNC. And I mean, NSYNC, Backstreet Boys, 98 Degrees, like
God,
all the heartthrobs.
that had to be so early. Like that was what, 97 or something like that. That had to be like really early in Sync's run, right? That was like first album.
Yeah. Oh
Ti-
yeah. No, I was
Titled
obsessed with
In
their first
Sync.
album. Like their first album was like I think my mom says one of her like only memories about painting my room in our house in Virginia was that she had to do it while she was listening to the NSYNC CD over and over and over again. I think I might have traumatized her with it.
Justin or JC?
I mean, neither, but
Oh,
I mean, if I have to choose between the two, Justin.
okay.
Because, like, especially because he really, like, I don't know, made himself more human, becoming an actor and whatever. So, like, you know,
More human.
well, I mean, come on. They're celebrities. And, you know, when they're, especially when they're just like, you know, singing and dancing and whatever, like, you know, you're not necessarily getting a feel for their personality, but
Yeah.
like, you know, and me saying Justin is from like years later from seeing him in movies and stuff. But I was always a Lance fan.
Really?
Like I had a thing for like overlooked people, like the underdog and like people that weren't as popular as other people. So I really dug Lance.
Oh, that's hilarious. Look at that overlooked blonde hair, blue eye guy there. Was he blue eyes? I feel like he had blue eyes.
I couldn't tell
He
you what
definitely
color
had
eyes he
blonde hair.
had.
The
Oh, for
spiky.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, he never got any solo parts. He was just like the bass on like I
Yep.
remember I think it was he had one song where he kind of got to sing. I want to say it was like Drive Myself Crazy or God Must Have Spent a Little More Time with You. One of those. And I was kind of like, yeah, go ahead, Lance. You get that part.
I remember him having like a bass part that stood out more in the Everything I Own song.
Oh, see, I don't even know the deep cuts.
Well, I mean, when you
What's
listen
that?
to
Yeah,
the
yeah. What's
same
that? What's that
album
track?
over
Track?
and over again.
Yeah, track 9 or something.
Well, that I couldn't tell you, but I can still hear it in my mind.
Favorite NSYNC song?
I mean, I'm gonna have to say bye 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 because you know we learned the dance and you know it was on the radio all the time.
Mm,
You know, back before you know people all had CD players in their car. So you know, listening to the radio
mm-hmm.
and you know that was the one that would come on the most. So yeah, that was it.
Um, no one ever gives them any credit, but I was a big fan of Five. Do you remember Five?
Vaguely, but I
They were the
wasn't like into it.
they were the British. Yeah, no one was. It was just me. Like they were the most hip hop of them all, but they had that Baby When the Lights Go Out. That's the only song I know.
Oh,
But
I definitely remember that
yeah,
song.
that was like my jam. And I always like maybe it's my overlook syndrome where I'm
I
rooting
was
for
just gonna say you have a little bit of that in you too.
I'm rooting for the entire group that no one's been. But you know what? You're totally right. I was totally like that with like Jessica Simpson. I'm like they don't like her because she's like thicker and more developed and like and they're body shaming her, but she has the best voice. She's the closest thing to Mariah Carey that's coming out right now. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was that Irresistible remix with Bow Wow. Ooh, fire. Fire.
It takes a very secure man to admit that.
Yeah, I even now I still like I'll get into some of these some of these pop stars albums now 20 years later and I was like these are really good.
Well, I haven't really had a huge opportunity to listen to a lot of current stuff. I have two kids, so
Keep you busy, does it?
I am always busy. Like the fact that I even had time to do this is because my oldest is at her dad's house and my youngest is spending the day with her mom. So
Perfect.
I got to an AA meeting today. I actually, you know, had a slightly longer shower than I normally get because I didn't have to worry about what was going on when I was in the shower.
Look at this
So,
look at all this self-care time I've afforded you.
oh, I can't even thank you enough for that. It's been a very relaxing day for me.
You're gonna have to fake schedule yourself into some more podcasts.
Well, you know, one of the nice things about like having family close by, um, at least my youngest daughter's other side of her family, like she goes and sees her mom once a week, and that's great. And you know, I have my family here, so when I really need it, it's there.
Yeah. Um What was your relationship like during your days of addiction with your parents? I see now that you guys look so happy and great. I can't imagine it was always like that. But as you're like needing help, what is that like? Were you still in college when this was all coming about?
Well, like I said, I went to IUP. There's not much to do there. Like I always told people when I was trying to like give them an idea of like how podunk it kind of is that Kmart was an anchor store in the mall there.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. So like there was like a little town built around the campus,
Yeah.
that extended as far as the Walmart, but then
Mm.
there was nothing. Um, Nothing. And I mean a ton of bars and whatever because it was a college town. But that's when my drug use really took off.
Mm.
Because I found out that if you mix alcohol with certain other drugs, you can drink a whole lot more alcohol. And if you mix them with those drugs, then you can stay awake longer. You're not the sloppy one. You're not the one that's constantly, needing to be taken care of, although eventually I still was anyway.
Mm.
But my drug use really took off then. I ended up dropping out of school and moving back home. And I mean, I didn't even really understand what was wrong with me at that point. I really just thought I was a party girl. Like that, I just really like to drink and party and have a good time. I really didn't understand what the problem was.
Mm.
And then when I moved back home, I got introduced to Oxycontin. And for anyone that's watched Dope Sick on Hulu, um, that changed everything for me. It turned me into a thief. It turned me into a liar. Um, I could not be trusted in any way because I was so addicted to Oxycontin that was literally all that mattered. It didn't matter who I had to screw over, who I had to rob, and I'm not saying I like stuck anybody up at gunpoint. I'm just saying if you turn your back and your purse is near me, it wasn't safe. So, that really took off. And even at that point, I don't think my family understood either. It wasn't like the recovery community has worked very hard over a lot of years to reduce and we hope to eventually remove the stigma attached to addiction issues. But at that time, it wasn't something people talked about. The
Right.
people that were addicts in families got sent away and, whatever. So, I got kicked out of my parents' house. I left voluntarily because, it was cramping my style with my drug use. I mean, I alienated everyone that I loved and that loved me. And I actually went to a Christian program out in Cresco, Iowa at one point. And they call it the Christian alternative to rehab. And it's nothing like rehab.
Okay.
Nothing like rehab. It's just basically like cultivating your relationship with God and teaching you how to lean on that instead of drugs. And as great as it was for my spirituality and my relationship with God, it did nothing for my addiction issues. So it actually wasn't until I got sober this last time that I had a therapist that sat down and talked to my parents. And, it wasn't that they didn't want to understand, because they did want to understand, but she said something that, made it easier for them to understand. So, I had periods of time where I was, in better graces than others, but it wasn't until I got sober this last time when I did almost 9 months of inpatient treatment. I just wanted everything I could get. I wanted all the knowledge I could get. I wanted to work through all the issues as much as I could. So I stayed in treatment until insurance would not pay for me to be in there any longer. And our relationship has been great since then. But, I really hurt my sister. I did a lot of damage to that relationship. I broke my parents' hearts over and over and over again. But in the program, some like when you make amends, you ask somebody what you can do, but like with those relationships, I make what's called living amends. So like I choose every day to get up and stay clean and sober and show up where I'm supposed to be, when I'm supposed to be there. And, my family can count on me. So like my amends to them are living amends, staying sober and, just always doing the next right thing.
How do you get to Iowa when you're when you leave your house and I'm assuming you're like 20 at that point?
Oh no, I was late 20s.
Oh, okay.
Late 20s. It was a plane ride to Minneapolis. Then it was like a shuttle service from the airport to I think it was Rochester, Minnesota. And then someone from, it's called Mission Teens, the place I went to. Someone from the mission came to get me from a pickup point at that point, because I'm pretty sure that that's the closest airport to Cresco, Iowa, is at least one that would take me to Philadelphia, was Minneapolis.
So did your parents actually send you to this?
Well, it's actually free.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, how do you get to? Well, I guess my question: how do you literally do you buy? Do you have money in all this during this time and to actually get yourself a plane?
I mean, my parents were the ones that found the program.
Okay.
And they asked me if I would be willing to go and get help. And I said yes. So they put me on a plane.
Okay.
And I was there for 9 months. But everything at the mission is basically, I mean, they rely on God to provide things for the mission. So like local people donate things and whatever, but there's no cost associated with being there. You just have to come with enough bus fare so that if you get kicked out, they can put you on a bus to go back home.
I know a couple of jobs that do that sort of thing too.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was a crazy experience. I'm really glad I went. I mean, I'm Christian. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm very proud of that. I lean very heavily on my relationship with God in my daily life and especially in my recovery. It wasn't the thing that made the difference for me to be able to find some long-term sobriety.
What did you find in the one that worked, the inpatient that you stayed at for 9 months, where it finally kicked in? What worked for you?
Well, I mean,
or what did you learn that you've been able to keep with you this whole time?
Well, at that point, I was as broken as I'd ever been. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I have been sober for 5 years. So obviously, she was deeply affected by my addiction and alcoholism for, the first 7 years of her life. And I kept losing her, and
legally, you mean?
Well, just like her dad would take her and keep her from me. And I mean, rightfully so, because I mean, I wasn't even in a position to take care of myself, much less, a child. So by the time I went to treatment, I was just so beat up and so broken that I was desperate. I was willing to do whatever it took. So between my alcohol abuse and my drug abuse, I had put myself basically in a state of psychosis. So the beginning of my recovery journey started in an inpatient psychiatric facility, where I detoxed and got on the meds I got on there didn't turn out to be the right ones. It was actually, later on that I found the right ones. But, that was kind of like my detoxing period, trying to get my mental health under control.
Sure, yeah.
So then I went to short-term rehab from there. And I was the nerdy kid in the rehab, walking around with a notebook, taking notes everywhere, keeping all the handouts. I didn't ever want to go back to what my life was before that. So I listened to everything. I did trauma groups to work on how to work through my trauma. And, I did parenting stuff, and I did everything that they would let me do because I didn't want to go back. So I did short-term rehab, and then I actually did long-term rehab after that in Bensalem at a women's program, and that was amazing. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. There was there's a mommy and me program there, but I didn't have my daughter there. Right. I just did the women's program, but I still did parenting classes, and I had amazing therapists, like just, people that are so passionate about what they're doing that like it shows in everything they do. So I did that, and then I did a halfway house in the same program on the same property. I got a job, I started working, and then I actually moved into it's called a transition house. It's like halfway between a recovery house and a sober house as far as like freedoms go. So because I had spent so much time in inpatient treatment, that was the best decision for me, and I stayed there for a long time too. I just wanted to do whatever it took to stay sober.
When you talk about trauma, is that, and you can be as specific or not as you want, is that from growing up previous to your drug use, where you're talking about, what you were dealing with as far as your self-esteem and not liking yourself, or is it trauma that compounds after the drinking and the drug use has started?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of both. I mean, even before I was like super heavy into the drinking and partying in high school, I still partied.
Okay.
So I had been drinking in a way that you could consider alcoholically, and I found myself as a result of that in a situation where something really traumatic happened to me. And that like really just kind of put me in a different level, because it wasn't just me trying to escape me anymore. It was me trying to numb the pain. So once that happened, like, I mean, I obviously there could have been turning back, but looking back at that point, there was no turning back at that point.
Once you come out, and maybe even now that you're 5 years through, what do you look back at that time that was different, that you maybe didn't know, didn't have in your life, that you have now, or you understand now, that makes things better, different?
Well, I mean, once I started doing drugs, alcohol wasn't as interesting to me anymore. So even once I accepted the fact that I was a drug addict, I didn't accept the fact that I was an alcoholic. So I would try to stop doing drugs, but continue drinking. And so I didn't understand, or maybe didn't want to understand, that, at least for me, those two go hand in hand. So, trying to stop doing drugs, but not stop drinking, tripped me up a whole bunch. So, now I know that when it comes to any and all mind and mood altering substances outside of, psychiatric medication, whatever, that I can't touch them.
It's interesting. I had a friend go through his battles with alcoholism in his 20s, while we were at our prime, you might say. And I remember, and he had been sober for years, and was still smoking weed. And I remember when he fell off the wagon, and his sponsor came and was like, "Dude, you're smoking weed. That's like moving your seat to the back of the Titanic. You're still going down." And I'd never considered that before. I'd never heard that phrasing before, but it gave me a very different perspective on just addiction and mind altering substances, period, for people who struggle with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I also, for plenty of times that I was trying to get clean, thought that weed was fine. And I mean, I support weed being used medicinally and recreationally for people who aren't, drug addicts,
Right.
whatever. But for me, like it loops in with everything. So, I can't do that. Um, and I might be able to maintain it for a little while,
Mhm.
like not doing anything but smoking weed, but eventually it leads me back to the things that I, use that I cannot control.
Yeah.
And I can't control myself when I'm on them.
Uh, did you were so I'm doing the math in my head. Does that make you 24 when you had your daughter?
Yes.
Where were you in life when that happened?
Well, super, super into my addiction. Um, I was working as a waitress at Red Lobster, and I was making really good money, having a great time partying with all my, colleagues, all the time. And I mean, I like to think that they didn't know that I was like doing drugs while they were all just like partying and having a good time. But looking back, they probably knew.
Yeah.
Um, and I fell in love with my best friend, and we got engaged, and then a month later found out that I was pregnant with Isabella. And I tried really hard to stay on the straight and narrow after that. I think that everyone kind of thought that the baby was going to save me,
Hmm.
that if I just had that responsibility and like had someone that was relying on me, that would make a difference.
Hmm.
And I did okay for a little bit, but I relapsed after she was born. And that started the, you know, me being in and out of her life constantly.
When you were young, did you have any thoughts about family, marriage, kids? You mean, you talked about you and your best friend talking about, oh, when we're older, our kids are going to grow up together. Was that through high school, middle school, high school? Was that kind of the thought of like the classic family?
I mean, probably, yeah. But the older I got, the less that mattered to me, because I mean, I remember when we were really young, it was super uncommon to have someone's friend's parents be divorced. You
Right.
know, I mean, obviously the divorce rate shot up really high after that, but in my early 20s, it was just kind of whatever happens happens.
Hmm.
And I tried not to put like any expectation on it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I remember like kids when I was younger in elementary school, their parents getting divorced and thinking like, oh yeah, look at like it was like almost like a thing to be able to brag about, like, oh, my parents are together, and then my parents get divorced in middle school, and it's like, oh no, I'm one of those kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember that like very clearly of how it was kind of like you just didn't see it a whole lot, and then you start to hear more and more about it, and then it happens to you. And now I know so many people that get married and divorced, after minimal years, no kids. So that's where we are now with marriage.
Yeah, well, I've been married and divorced twice. So,
Twice.
yeah, I'm
Uh,
just really, really trying hard not to be Ross Geller from Friends. Because, like, after the second divorce, all I could hear in my head was three divorces, three divorces.
Never watched Friends.
No,
Never watched it.
still not.
Still haven't seen it. I'm aware of like stuff because when we were, I think in middle school, the Rachel haircut was like huge, and I remember
Mm-hmm.
like Katie Evelyn had the Rachel haircut, and but that was about it. I just watched. You ever see Honest Trailers
The
online?
what?
Honest Trailers online.
No.
So on YouTube, they've got this thing. It's a YouTube channel called Screen Junkies, and every week they do an honest trailer for a movie. And basically, it's just like a if someone were to take all the marketing stuff out of it and just tell you this is really what it is. This is what the
Mm-hmm.
movie is, kind of blunt, honest truth. They do that, and occasionally they do TV shows. So they did Friends like a year or two ago, and that's the first time I've seen any of these clips. I never knew there were so many repetitive. Could you be any? I never knew that was like a thing, and just all these. All I'd ever heard about was like how there were no black people on the show. That was all I ever really knew about Friends.
I guess now that I think about it, that's true.
And that the friends dated. That was like the bulk of what I knew.
Hmm. Well, I
Court,
mean, like I was obsessed with it. So like you saying that you've never watched it is like, but
see, here's the funny thing: is the things that I was obsessed with, nobody watched. So like,
like what?
well, like pro wrestling. Very few people watched pro wrestling. I was the wrestling guy in high school. I wore the wrestling T-shirts, and I would talk to everyone about the wrestling news. And did you
You're
hear
talking
about
about
the?
like WWE?
Yeah, like The Rock and Stone
Oh, okay.
Cold, and that's the stuff that I used to like talk to people about. I'd have all the magazines and stuff, and no one was. I was the guy that would force people to like to pay attention to wrestling with me. That's what my friends would have to do when they would come over. You snuck out. I made them stay in and watch VHS tapes from 1992 to see Bret Hart win the Intercontinental title. You know, like
Would
I
it
was.
shock you to hear that I know exactly what you're talking about?
That would shock me.
my my oldest daughter's father, my first husband, was really into that. He grew up watching it, and so the entire time we were together, almost every night, every Monday night, we were watching Monday Night Raw.
Oh, Get Out. Yeah. Okay. All right. See, so now you know how kind of like oddballish that is, though.
For sure.
The other thing I was really obsessed with, and it's a little bit of a mixture, but I think as I was in high school era, it really transformed into this. It started with Saved by the Bell, but by the time I got into high school, I was heavy into 90210.
I mean, I got it super into Saved by the Bell, but 90210 wasn't really my thing. Like I knew about it, and I could probably tell you based on a picture like what character that person was, but I didn't really watch it.
So when Tiffany Amber Thiessen, when Saved by the Bell ended and her and Zach got married in Vegas, like news broke out like next season she's joining 90210, and I'm like, well, got to start watching that now.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, anything Tiffany Amber Thiessen did, I would watch. Those real shitty ABC movie of the Sunday night movie of the weeks that she would
Mm-hmm.
do. But she fought. I still remember the name. She Fought Alone, and like these really horrible weekly movies. I used to watch anything that she would do. Son-in-Law, that movie with her and Pauly Shore.
Oh, I love that movie.
Okay, so
I
yeah,
would still watch that movie right now.
I wouldn't. Uh, I just watched like I was just a sucker for, and like no one watched this stuff at all. Again, I could make like one or two friends. I could force them to get into it with me, but I was like on an island on my own for TV shows.
Yeah. Well,
Did
it's
you?
not bad to be different.
This is true. You just some.
Now it's not bad to be different.
But when you're looking for like a partner to like talk about David and Donna and their relationship, and no one wants to talk to you about it, it's tough, Jess. It's tough.
I feel your pain, dude.
Did you have Friends was your show, but did you have a movie that you were into in high school? Your favorite movie?
I mean, I must have watched Never Been Kissed with
Oh
Drew
yeah,
Barrymore like I don't know, a few thousand times.
that's a classic.
Oh yeah. And I mean, like even when it wasn't new anymore, but mostly like shows after that, and Grey's Anatomy came out
Oh
when I
yeah.
was in high school. And
Wow,
I'm not even
really?
ashamed to admit that I still watch it every night on Netflix while I'm going to sleep.
Grey's is that old that it was on when you were in high school?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
I mean,
wild.
what year is this now? Uh, so I think I graduated 18 years ago.
That makes sense because we're well, I was 01, so that was 19 years ago. So that so you would have been a little bit less, right? You're 04. So what are we in 2022? Oh, that is 18.
Yeah. Well, it's sometimes it's hard to remember that this is 2022 because the last 2 years of our lives have just been completely bizarre.
I know. Like I've lost the last 3 years. Whenever I tell someone something, they go couple years ago, a couple years ago, starting from before COVID, because that's when my brain starts picking up dates again.
Exactly.
Um, but Never Been Kissed is like I have this joke that I used to always say, if I could catch She's Always That and Never Been Kissed on a Sunday afternoon on ABC Family, I'm not leaving the house.
Oh, for sure.
That was like the one of the best, and Courtney Cox's husband,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
David Arquette.
I mean, they're not together anymore.
No, no, but also just to tie it all in together with all of our likes, former WCW wrestling champion David Arquette wrestled for a brief period of time.
No, he did not.
Yeah, he won the title and all that. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to Google that later.
There is a documentary. So he's a big wrestling fan. He loves wrestling, and he had this horrible run where he worked in a wrestling. When that movie Ready to Rumble came out with him and Scott Kahn, where they're like wrestlers, and I think Oliver Platt is like some legendary wrestler. It's this.
I can see the movie poster, but I don't think I saw the movie.
No one saw the movie. So it's so everyone hated it so much, and they made him the world champion, and the fans just crapped all over it, that it's haunted David Arquette his entire rest of his life. It's like a big joke with wrestling fans of David Arquette. So a few years ago, he decided to try and like redeem himself, and he entered into what's called a death match, and where you can beat guys up with, you know, sticks and shards of glass and light tubes and stapler guns and X-Acto knives and stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So there's a documentary about this called, I think it's called You Can't Kill David Arquette, about his match, this death match that he had that went terribly wrong. The wrestler ended up, like the guy ended up not trusting him, and they ended up getting in like a real tussle in the ring, which ends with the guy stabbing David Arquette in the jugular. And he starts like leaking out blood, and he tells David Arquette, like, just lay there, I'll pin you, and he does that, and then Luke Perry has to like rush him out, and they go to the hospital.
My God.
So there's a gift for you. You Can't Kill David Arquette. Yeah, it's a documentary streaming, I'm sure, on all the Netflixes and whatnot. See, this is why no one watches wrestling. It's just a little bit off.
It is a little bit off, but you know, it's like so many little boys watched it growing up, like whether they'll admit it or not.
Yeah.
But like, you know, there's a storyline ish, and you know, most of it looks real. So
yeah,
you know, are you not entertained?
Exactly. You mentioned Never Been Kissed, and I feel like the big part of that was Drew Barrymore trying to be liked by the cool kids. I mentioned earlier, just by like your partying habits, that sounds like cool kid stuff and the fluid friends. Did you consider yourself, and I don't know because I didn't know your grade well enough, but did you consider yourself a cool kid?
No.
In the popular
definitely
crowd?
not. I mean, there were people in the popular crowd that I hung out with, but no, definitely not, especially not after I, you know, took up my cause with musical theater.
It's always a negative.
You know what? My daughter's really into it now. She's actually at theater camp. She's doing Legally Blonde Junior.
That's cool.
You know, at the end of next week. But like, it's cool to her and to her friends, and like, it's popular and whatever. And I'm just thinking, how different would my life have been if it was cool to do when I was doing it instead of something that made me kind of nerdy.
Well, yeah, there were no like you know, Glee and High School Musical.
Oh,
I
know. After Glee came out, it was so much cooler to be a theater nerd.
Yeah, it wasn't in the masses, and that's why I asked like what got you into it, because it usually starts from just like your parents take you to stuff.
For sure.
When I talked to Amanda Christian about her love, and we had the same thing where our parents used to take us to the Valley Forge Music Center, or the Valley Forge Music Center, where they would do like shows, like, you know, monthly or whatever, and those were our experiences. But that was just like a thing for me and my mom to go do, and then it's like, oh well, now you guys all have this, and no one, if you didn't have that experience, you did not get it.
No, for sure. I mean, most people didn't get it.
And now it's just a whole new world. That's cool that your daughter's found a passion for it now, that it's not damaging to the reputation.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm happy for her, you know, like she gets to, I mean, it's not like kids aren't awful anymore, because they are. And I mean, like, you know, generally nonviolent human being. I've wanted to punch a few 12-year-olds after my daughter came home from school crying, you know, like kids are awful, but she seems to have found a way to be herself and at least be surrounded by a bunch of other people that are cool with it.
Yeah.
She gets bullied and I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. But, I just keep reminding her that, like, the kids that are bullying the other kids, like, they're peaking in middle school, high school, whatever. Like, you get to be exactly who you are and go on to live this amazing full life based on your passions. Like, feel sorry for the kids that are so unhappy with themselves that they have to tear other people down.
Do you believe that in reality?
To an extent, sure.
Yeah. I was gonna say, because I feel like that's what I always used to hear, and I had my bullied moments, and I still check out some of those kids on Instagram and Facebook. I'm like, they look like they're doing okay.
Well, I mean, come on, Instagram and Facebook is definitely not a meter for how people are actually doing.
Right, this is true. Everyone, this is how we started it.
Foot forward.
Did you get bullied in school?
A little bit. I mean, not a ton, but I mean, made fun of, sure, a lot.
The gist that I've gotten from talking, and I'm always curious from the girl perspective of like where it goes, because from the guy's perspective, like for me, it was always just very aggressive. You got a beef, I got a beef. Let's yell about it, or maybe we'll meet in the hallway or the bathroom, and maybe we'll punch each other a couple times, and or maybe they'll punch me, and I'll just not do anything else. But like it was always very aggressive. So I'm always curious to what extent it goes for girls. I've heard it can be, well, ranging from like passive to shit written on the bathroom walls to everyone just stops talking to me and I don't know why these girls aren't my friends anymore.
I mean, I would definitely trade like some chest bumping and fists thrown for the way the girls do it. Girls are horrible. Like, and I sometimes, like, my daughter will say something that like sounds a little mean girlish, and I'm like, no, you stop that right now, because like you're coming home crying because somebody made fun of you for something. Think about what you just said and the fact that you are passing that pain on to somebody else. But like, group shunning and stuff written on the bathroom walls and gossip, so much gossip. Like, you make one mistake or you have one embarrassing moment and girls will tell everyone that they come across. It doesn't even matter if they're this girl's friend, she's still going to tell. And if a girl has a beef with somebody and she has a friend group, the whole friend group has a beef with somebody. And, fake nice to your face and super horrible to, you behind your back. Like the girl stuff is way more of a mind fuck. Pardon my language, but I don't know how else to put it. Like I would so much rather like we throw a couple punches and have it be done.
Oh, it was never done.
Actually, one of my favorite high school memories was two dudes got in a fight in what did we call that area where the halls converge, the knuckle? Is that what we called it?
Oh, I don't know about this. See, so are you talking about after the construction got done?
Yeah.
Because so I did my first like 2-3 years in the old school.
Okay.
And then like my senior year was like the new. So I don't know these. What is the knuckle?
Well, the upstairs science hall.
D hall,
and then
right?
Down the stairs. Okay. And then the downstairs science hall and up the stairs, basically right in front of the elevator.
Okay.
Okay. So like, I don't know, 3 or 4 different hallways converged right there. So 2 dudes got into a fist fight. And I mean, I wasn't close enough to it to be like freaked out by it, but obviously fascinated. So I had to watch. And they were big dudes. Like I want to say football players. So out of nowhere, Mr. Dixon, my favorite teacher of all time, comes in and grabs this dude up with his arm around his neck and pulls him off the other dude and slams him up against the wall.
That's his move. Oh my God, that's his finishing maneuver. He did the same thing to me.
Well, maybe it was you that I saw.
That's incredible. No, so I got in a fight in the cafeteria with C Money, my senior year, like a week before graduation, and he was not defending himself, and I'm just kicking him, like I'm punching him and kicking him and kneeing him, and I see this guy run in from the side, and I don't know who it is, so he grabs me, and now I'm just like literally, now I have no arms, and I'm kicking C Money in the face. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe, and he tightens up on my neck, and
Yep.
that's when I realized it's Mr. Dixon.
It's
And he's
Mr.
like,
Dixon.
he's like, it's over, it's over. And I'm like, I'm cool, I'm cool, I'm cool. And he came and apologized to me afterwards. He's like, I'm sorry, but that kid couldn't defend himself. I had to make you stop. And that's incredible to know that that was his go-to.
Dude, I'm telling you, like
The Navy choke.
the best dude ever. Period. Mr. Dixon, hands
Awesome.
down.
It's funny because I never had him, but like I had.
I didn't
just,
either.
Yeah, everyone just had this utmost respect for him.
Oh yeah. Well, and I don't even. Oh, you know what? He was my homeroom teacher in ninth grade,
Okay.
and only ninth grade. But like, you know, we connected like on a student and mentor level. So for the entire rest of high school, I dropped into his room all the time.
Oh, that's cool.
And like, you know, talked to him about stuff that was bothering me and hung out with him on my free periods. Like the coolest dude ever. And
Definitely.
all he was my homeroom teacher in ninth grade, but I will never forget him as long as I live. Sometimes I still hear from him on Facebook.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite teacher?
That I actually took a class of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, Madame Irish. She was my French teacher. And I'm pretty sure that was like 11th and 12th. But
Oh, you took a lot of foreign language.
well, yeah, I took French all through middle school and high school.
Wow.
Don't ask me to speak it now. It's gone. Okay.
That's the same.
It's gone. I understand so much more than I could speak, but it's gone. Oh God, I'm sorry, Madame Irish. Oh man. But you know, at first we kind of butted heads because she was very strict and you know, whatever, but like turns out I needed that, you know, and she just ended up being one of the best, most memorable teachers I had.
Strict how? How strict does French class get? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, pretty strict. I mean, I don't even know if she would remember this, but at one point I wore a skirt to school and apparently it was too short. So she had me stand up and I actually had to read the dress code guidelines out loud for how short my skirt could be. And in fact, it was technically too short for the dress code, but I didn't make that mistake again.
You know, that's another interesting. I remember like all these rules kind of coming in when we were going out. And a lot of it was like, well, one was the water bottles because kids were throwing vodka in their water bottles were like brand new at this point where like everyone had a water bottle and kids were putting vodka in it. And that's when the school realized that they couldn't detect it. So that was just like a no-go on water bottles. But the other was the dress code. And I imagine it's always been a thing, but I felt like this is where we were officially getting like rules about the inseam and how far from your knee skirts and shorts can go and like no tube tops and what are the not tube tops, so what are the things with the straps, what are those shirts
What,
called?
like a strappy tank top or like a halter top?
Yeah, like a strappy
I think
tank.
I don't think either of them were allowed.
Yeah, like you couldn't have the thin strapped shirts. All that stuff was like being outlawed.
Yeah.
I imagine though when you're a girl, like those are the things that's all you're buying.
Well, I mean, sometimes, yeah, but like I mean, I'm in leggings and a super soft, comfortable shirt right now, and that's like pretty much my life. Like I dress for comfort, but you know, my 12-year-old is also a political activist.
Oh.
And she thinks that dress codes are antiquated and out of date because if a woman wearing something like that makes it so that a boy can't control himself, then the problem is with the boy, not with the clothes. So, God, I love her. She is fabulous in every single way.
I was going to say this sounds like sounds like how we would describe this today, and I don't know. I guess the dress codes are still, I got to think, a thing, but
Yeah, they're still a thing.
You didn't feel oppressed by it back then, though, right?
No, not even close. I mean, you know, and especially looking back as an adult, like it's not, it's about what's appropriate in a particular situation and what's not.
Right.
Like, I mean, probably shouldn't be wearing skirts that if you bent over, then, people would see all sorts of stuff. I mean, maybe in some situations that's appropriate, but in a classroom setting, no.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a feminist, don't get me wrong, but like there's a time and a place to be exactly as wild and, outlandish as you want to be, but school's not one of them.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is that I feel like that rule is supposed to be protective for women. Protective, we'll use that in, if you're listening
Mm-hmm.
to this podcast, I just put up air quotes. But for guys, our big thing was, I think they said no tank tops, but also like we were the baggy jeans era.
Mm-hmm.
And I never felt like it was protective of us to say that we couldn't wear jeans that show, with our boxers sticking out, or,
Mm-hmm.
for guys that didn't wear boxers, their tighty whities or whatever, because there were some. But I felt like it was more like a disgust, like they were disgusted with with seeing our asses, and
No,
for the
I think that's
guys.
accurate.
It's so interesting how just the tone is so different,
Oh yeah.
for the way it was for guys versus girls as far as this dress code.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna get all political, but like it is. It's completely different,
Yeah.
and I understand it to an extent, but I'd really appreciate it if we could raise some future generations to be better, you know?
Yeah. And not victimize women for what they're wearing.
Yes. Yes,
That's
exactly.
the start.
Hmm.
Um, did you work in school?
No. Well, senior year. I worked at Tony A's Pizza in Springhouse.
Absolutely, by the
Um,
Blockbuster.
yeah, which is pharmacy now.
Yeah, the Springhouse Pharmacy moved. That whole I'm doing this from memory,
That
but that
whole
whole
place looks
thing got
different now.
redone. Yeah, and so
Yeah.
the Springhouse Pharmacy, or the Village Pharmacy, moved up to
Oh
there,
yeah.
right?
Is Tony A still there though? I haven't been over
I
there in a while.
that I don't know.
Well, I worked there senior year, but my parents always wanted my job to be school.
Hmm.
I mean, my parents both have college degrees. My mom went to UVA and then William and Mary.
Oh wow.
And my dad has a degree from LSU. So, school was supposed to be my job.
Hmm.
So yeah, I worked a little bit.
Do you and I know that you went through so much through your 20s, but do you think that I'm just wondering if you did that affect you at all, as far as like not working when you were a teenager, and then getting into where like you're a grown up and you have to work, and this is kind of like the first time you're really giving it a go?
I mean, I don't really think so. Once it turns out that college wasn't really for me, and it's not for everybody.
Right, I
And,
hear that a lot.
um, once I started working, it was just something you had to do. And I
Yeah.
mean, I waited tables for over a decade. So, at least it was fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucked. It was hard. And like this, like, is my second carpal tunnel surgery, because I had this one done in April, from carrying trays all those years.
Wow.
And it turns out that it doesn't go away. Like I would have flare ups and then it would stop hurting. So I figured that it was just going away, and it wasn't going away. So, years and years later, I'm having, carpal tunnel release surgery on both of my hands. But it was fun. We were like, we all made a game out of it. Even if you hated people, like if you couldn't stand somebody's personality, you still worked with them as a team in a restaurant and probably still drank with them after work.
Hmm.
You just like, left whatever like differences aside. Like, I mean, it was so physically taxing. And to this day, I still have serving nightmares that like I have more tables than I can handle. and I'm in the weeds and I can't get out, like I still have those dreams. So obviously I'm somewhat traumatized from working as a waitress all those years, but like that we were a family, you know, like it was awesome.
I still have dreams that I'm walking into the Springhouse Wawa where I worked for like 7 years, and I'm going to the back and realizing that I have not checked the schedule for 2 weeks and I've missed all my shifts, and I'm wondering if I'm fired or not. I have that dream multiple times a year.
It's actually pretty fascinating the things that traumatize us, right?
Um, yeah, God, I just flashed back.
Yeah.
I just had a
Just
flashback.
like put you in a weird mind space, right?
I legit was thinking about like the latex gloves and the powder, and like when we would be out of extra large and they tell you just put the mediums on, and you're just like, can I take your order? Oh God.
Actually, I do remember you working there.
Oh, Wawa?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that would
That
be
was
where I
for a
would.
while too.
Yeah, I worked there from when I was 16. So the deal with that was like my first job was at McDonald's, and there was an upperclassman named Wade Craig who worked at Wawa, and he was like, "Dude, they pay $6 an hour," and I was like, "Oh wow, that's so much better than the 5.15 I'm making at McDonald's." So the day I turned 16, I called, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we'll pay you 6," and I was just like, "I'm rich. I am rich." And I stayed there. I stayed at Wawa through college. I left that store once I graduated, but I stayed at Wawa for like another 3 years. Um,
Well, I worked at Wawa for a little bit. Like if you stick around, they take pretty good care of you.
yeah, it was like, especially as a kid, it was like if you worked 30 hours, like one, you accrued vacation time, you got like private stock. And you got benefits. You got like $500 stipend a year, which was great for like prescription or ibuprofen or whatever. Um,
Anything working in food service, you need ibuprofen. If
yeah.
you've worked in food service, have you taken your ibuprofen today?
Oh man, and you know what? Around there, you got the free soda. So I used to get wicked caffeine headaches, like horrible caffeine, and I needed like 2 to 3 ibuprofen like every day if I wasn't drinking soda. But it's Hoagie Fest now, and it makes me shudder when I'm seeing. I literally saw someone with like a 6 foot Wawa hoagie earlier today, and I'm just like, get away from me.
Well, you know what makes me do that?
What's
Endless
that?
shrimp.
Red Lobster.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was going to be the cheddar biscuits.
Oh, I like just started to be able to eat them again.
Yeah.
I was working at Red Lobster when I was pregnant with my oldest. And I mean, with both my kids, I had morning sickness every hour that I was awake.
Mm.
But for some reason, if I ate the cheddar biscuits, which I hated from serving them and having people be so insane about them,
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, I could keep Cheddar Bay biscuits down. But I mean, it took me years and years and years and years to be able to enjoy them again.
Fun fact: I've never been to a Red Lobster.
Really?
Never been. I
Wow.
don't. I've made the cheddar biscuits. Someone gave me like a box of them that I
Mm-hmm.
made a few years ago, and that's the closest I've ever come. And it's funny is like I think growing up it was always like a joke of like I think that's maybe where they went for like big nights out on Married with Children. So in my head, Red Lobster was like not this good place. And then I saw a commercial, many years later. I'm like, oh, they just sell lobster there? That's cool. Like I never really thought about that they just sell like you could get lobster there. What was the deal with Red Lobster as far as quality?
I mean, as good as you can get in a chain restaurant like that. And I mean, every Red Lobster has a live Maine lobster tank. Um, and I don't know what it is now, but when I was working, there were two different sizes, 1.25 pound and 3 pound.
Okay.
And the price depended on the market price of the day. So when we were bored, we used to take the lobsters out of the tank and play with them now.
I think it's cruel. I think it's considered cruel to animals now.
Well, it's not like we were poking them or anything. We just put them on the ground to see if they would race each other.
Start
Fun
betting
fact,
money.
they don't race each other on
They
a
don't.
carpet.
No?
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I think I just had like I just had misconceptions about Red Lobster that I cheated myself out of the experience.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for now. I think the last time I went to a Red Lobster, who might have been for like Isabella's third birthday,
Okay.
and she's 12. Um, but I mean, I would eat there, and
Yeah.
I've worked there, so I think that says everything.
Yeah.
That I've worked there, and I would eat there.
And you would still eat there. Okay,
Hmm.
this is gonna be a bucket list item for me now. Red
Okay,
Lobster. I'm gonna
you
do
let me
this.
know how your experience
I
is.
will. I'm gonna put this on the immediate must do list. Um, so how did you talked about your parents and I forget the term that you used as far as like gaining their trust back, but like through how like waking up every day,
Oh,
um,
my living amends.
living amends. Yeah.
Hmm.
I imagine I'm guessing, but I imagine for like a young kids are so much more forgiving, but
Yeah.
it sticks with them probably in ways that they don't know yet. How do you gain the trust back of your daughter?
Well, I mean, like just really just raw is that um when I did the thing in Iowa and everyone thought that was going to make the difference. Um I left right after her first day of kindergarten to go do this 9 months in Iowa. And then I came back and I had an apartment in Conshohocken. She was with me every weekend, whatever. But, you know, I wasn't, uh, I wasn't using in front of her all the time or anything like that. But like my general rule is that I waited until she went to sleep. So the next day, I didn't want to get off the couch or,
Mm,
whatever. So she still has memories of me being sick, and not really wanting to do much of anything. And then, when everyone figured out that, I had relapsed, I was using again, and I went to treatment this time when I got sober. Um, I mean, it's not like anyone really knows what to do in that situation, but um, you know, my ex didn't let me see or speak to her for a year and a half.
mm,
And obviously I wasn't around for that time, but I heard from him, from my parents, like what her behavior was like. Like she scratched my face out of all of the pictures she had of the two of us. I used to dye my hair red, like really red at that point, and if she saw a woman with red hair, she would break down crying.
mm,
Um, just like also because she was a little bit too young to really understand what was going on, just like general fits of anger. Um, and, through the process of us reuniting after I got sober, we actually spent some time with a therapist. Um, and I mean, at that point, I think she was just so happy that I was back and that I was fighting to be with her that I mean all I had to do was stay sober and she was going to be happy. I mean, we started with sessions in this therapist office, and then we started seeing each other for a couple hours on Sundays, and then I was getting her all like most of the day on Sundays, and then it started with overnights, whatever, and um now I have 50-50 custody of her. But
awesome.
sometimes I do check in with her, like especially when I get sick, which doesn't happen a lot because we've been homebound a whole bunch because
Sure.
of COVID and wearing masks. But even now, sometimes I check in with her when I get sick and say, like, you understand that this is sick, sick. This isn't sick, like, I am, recovering from using or whatever, and I can't get up off the couch. And, she's like, yeah, duh, mom, I know.
Mm,
Like, as if, like, why are you even asking me that? But, I mean, she seems great now, but I show up,
right.
I take her to school, I pick her up from school. I mean, not every day. Like, my parents help me out with stuff a lot, being a single parent. but I'm present for her events. You know, I do stuff with her. I let her have her friends over, whatever. I'm a mom.
Yeah.
So like I, I don't even see her get worried because like everything I do shows her that she doesn't have to worry.
Hmm. I'm curious. You said you did soaked up all the knowledge you could when you were in your inpatient, including parenting classes. What's the difference now with Charlie versus Isabella having those classes? What you've learned or what you realize you missed?
I mean, I missed a lot with Isabella and I hate that. Like I really hate that. Um, but Charlie turned 2 this past April, and I have been there with her every morning when she's woken up. Um, I've been there for every fever, every runny nose, just about every bedtime, and it's just like it's so much easier when you're not like abusing substances. I mean, I get plenty frustrated. I'm exhausted. I mean, she didn't sleep through the night until like 2 weeks before her first birthday. And I've basically been on like parenting wise, it's just been her and me for most of her life. So I mean, she was waking up like 4 or 5 times a night.
Hmm.
I mean, sleep deprivation does really crazy things to you, but like it's not even so much that I have to like implement stuff that I learned in parenting classes or anything like that, because like once I removed the drugs and alcohol and went through all the treatment that I went through, and I still go to meetings, like I'm still active in the recovery community, like these things are just there, like as far as like
Hmm.
me being able to handle them.
Instincts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're supposed to have them as women, but they were they were drowned out by drugs and alcohol for a
Yeah.
while. But now that there's nothing like in the way, like all these things are instinctual. I mean, I'm not always the best at handling my toddler looking at me and saying no when I ask her to do something. But the rest of it is pretty natural.
That's cool to hear. Do you what's your circle like now after sobriety? I know you said that you still go to meetings, and I know a lot of my friends that have been through programs, and um, they end up like surrounding themselves with people also in the program as like from a social standing, so that events that normally would drive people to drink, Super Bowl, whatever. They kind of have a different approach to it now. Is your circle similar? Do you surround yourself with people in the program? Are you living normal life and just going to meetings? What is your world like now?
No, my world is recovery. It's not like I can't hang out with people that aren't in recovery, but you're not going to catch me in a bar. You're probably not going to catch me at a party where people are drinking. Um, I can be around it and not drink. Um, I don't ever put myself in a situation where I could be in front of drugs,
Mm.
because that's a lot harder to say no to than a drink. But I most of my friends are from AA. I do stuff with people after meetings. I go to meetings, and it's just easier that way.
Hmm.
It's not like I can't do those other things, but another saying in the program, like if you go to a barbershop enough times, eventually you're going to get a haircut. So I've been in situations where there social situations where there's alcohol around me, and I'm the only one in my family that is a drug addict and alcoholic. So my family drinks, and that's fine.
Hmm.
But as far as social situations go, I just don't really want to tempt fate too often.
Yeah.
Like why?
Yeah.
It's not even worth it.
Um, 3 years into sobriety, and you had Charlie. What was that hard? Such a, I just remember thinking, I remember seeing that, you were into your sobriety and then pregnant, and I was just wondering how hard of a life change that was while you're still kind of, I imagine 3 years in, after years and years of drug abuse, you're still trying to find yourself. How do you, is that true, or was it easy, or how do you find a center in there to
Well,
stay
I
true
mean,
to what you want to do?
yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both, you know. Also, it being 10 years since my last
Last did this.
child, like things were different. My body hurt a lot more because I was a lot older. But I did find that I enjoyed I mean, honestly, I hated being pregnant. I hated every second of it. Like, you're huge, your body's not your own. Like, I mean, I would snore so loud I would wake myself up.
Mm.
Like, just it's uncomfortable, like physically uncomfortable. But the rest of it was just like awesome. Like, she's my sobriety baby.
Mm.
You know, like there's I wish that I could have given that to my older daughter. But I don't discount what she and I have having a restored relationship. But you know, and it's a lot easier when you're super upfront with every single medical provider you come in contact with,
Mm.
that you don't want, you know, pain medication unless it's absolutely necessary, you know,
Right.
and you know, that kind of stuff. So it was it was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. There were some difficult parts. Like I had kidney stones, um, and that was rough. But I got through that, like, and I still have my sobriety time. So, you know, I actually find that looking back on moments like that, where in the past I would have leaned on drugs or alcohol, when I don't, it's like, hell yeah, like I did that.
Yeah.
You know, it's something to look back on and see that I've conquered in a way that I could never conquer before.
Um, was that the hardest thing to do in sobriety?
No, no. Actually, the becoming a single parent in sobriety and dealing, you know, with a partner's relapse was the hardest thing that I did in sobriety.
Mm.
So, you know, but that's his story, not mine.
Yeah.
But it was very hard. But I mean, it was hard, but it wasn't impossible. You
Yeah.
know, like I can look at all these things that come up and these challenges that I face. And as long as I don't pick up a drink or a drug, there's nothing I can't do. As soon as I put one of those substances in my body, I start limiting what I can do.
What do you want to do? What is the future for you, or like immediate? I know you've been working, and you've got your home and you've got your daughters, and what is it that what are you aiming for now?
Well, I actually took time off work since before Charlie was born.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah, so you know, I have savings. I do other stuff. Um, and to be honest with you, I'm not that far off from where I was when I was 18 years old. You know, like the bills will get paid, and you know, whatever else. Like, I've thought about going into the recovery field and like being a recovery specialist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that has its own challenges with me being in recovery myself. A lot of times people like that ignore their own recovery because they think that the time that they're spending at work is enough to keep them sober, but it's
Mm.
not. Like, you still have to maintain your own recovery. And because the success rates are so low for people coming out of treatment, I think it would break my heart too much. You know, like it breaks my heart that like people disappear from my
Sure.
AA meetings, you know, like, but to actually pour myself into somebody while they're in treatment and, you know, share with them my experience, like you're giving of yourself, you know, to try to save somebody else. And a lot of people don't get saved. And I think that that would like really hurt me.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm just, you know, doing what I'm doing, and I'm gonna figure out something to do that I enjoy doing, but like I can also leave at work.
Yeah, that's a great point. The take home stress of certain professions.
Well, I'm a single parent and I have two kids. Like
Got enough
I
take
can't
home
I
stress.
I can't afford to take home stress from a job.
Do you have any passions now? Anything that like besides recovery that you think about like this could be something that maybe I'm going back to now like high school. If anything that
I
you're
know,
into
right?
that you think you could do for a career?
I mean, I thought about doing something like in the medical field, you know, like a radiology tech, or at one point I was doing classes to be a dental assistant, but I picked an accelerated course, and that's when I figured out that um, my ADD was not going to allow for me to take an accelerated course that was like super intensive stuff outside of class. Like most of the learning required outside of class, and inside class is applying what you figured out or read on your own
Mm,
outside of class. So that didn't really work out. But that doesn't mean that like a not accelerated course
right.
wouldn't be better for me. But I have to figure that out.
Yeah, you got to find
Really,
the right
just
thing for
I
you.
want to do something where I'm helping people. Something where I can put my people skills to use, and like I, especially since I got sober, an extremely compassionate person these days. Like whatever I do, I want to like, when I interact with people, like, I want them to feel better after
Mm,
having interacted with me.
that's cool. Well, I mean, just from your honesty and your openness and you know, your optimism and everything, I feel like anyone that's struggling with, addiction, if they listen to this, would feel better.
I mean, I hope so. Because I mean, you've seen my social media posts. Like, I always say, if I can do it, anyone can.
Yeah.
Like I was completely unrecognizable, like when I was in active addiction, like a horrible human being. Like, and maybe not a horrible human being, but a human being who was constantly doing horrible things,
Yeah.
So, now it's obviously different from that, but like, if I can go from that to this, then anybody can.
Yeah, definitely. That's an incredible story. I'm sorry that you went through these pains to get to this point, but I'm glad you're at this point.
Oh, thanks. This is I didn't think that at this point in my life I would be experiencing the best years of my life, but I am. I really am.
That's awesome. Congratulations to you. Seriously.
Thank you.